All right, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Jennifer Shellum. I'm the Commercialization Counselor at UTC. Thank you for joining our call today, our workshop called Exploring SBIR and STTR Funding Opportunities. I am dialing in or zooming in from the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which is on UTC's campus. And we've got actually Libby Santon, who's the director of the center, waving, and then Tom Lyons, who is a professor in marketing or entrepreneurship and marketing in the business school, who also heads that up. As part of the work that I'm doing on the UTC campus, I've got virtual office hours. I'm showing you on the slide here. You can always reach out to me if you want to talk about commercialization opportunities, invention disclosures, business ideas, and I can help you, counsel you, connect you. We are really excited about the CIE. And as campus starts to open up a bit more, we'll be having some in-person events there as well. But we're actually physically open. So if you have students, graduate students, or yourself, you want to come on over for a meeting, social distance meeting, we've got the space for it. We're in the second floor of the MAP building. And if you go to the UTC site and you just enter in CIE, you'll see the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship webpage will come up, and it's got my contact information on there as well. Today, we are going to have Allie Michaels, who's the Manager for Technology Advancement from Launch Tennessee, talk about SBIR and STTRs from both sort of the perspective of what the requirements are, but also opportunities with a focus on faculty. So what does it look like for you as a faculty or a researcher or staff if you're interested in pursuing an SBIR with a company or an STTR? And then Angie Johnson, who's the Assistant Director of the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, is going to talk to you about the kind of the requirements that you as a faculty member or staff member, UTC employee, need to be aware of. And then we'll take questions. If you have a question that you just want to get in the queue, go ahead and put it in the chat. I'll be moderating that. And I think, you know, as Allie goes along, she may have a pause point, but we certainly want to get to all of those. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Allie, so you can pull your slides up, and then I'll let you take it from there.
Awesome. And I always have to say, like, can you see my screen? I'm sure everyone's sick of hearing that, but, you know, that's how it goes these days. So everyone can see that? Awesome. Thank you for the thumbs up. Okay, so as Jennifer mentioned, my name is Allie Michaels. I'm the Manager of Tech Advancement with Launch Tennessee. And so I want to just start with a brief overview of Launch Tennessee. Won't spend a totally long time on that, but in case some of you are less familiar with our role as a statewide organization, we do operate statewide across Tennessee, and it's a public-private partnership, and we're really focusing on what we can do to make Tennessee the best state in the nation for startups. And how we do that is not alone, but through really a sort of a network of partners and resources that support the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So we actually have a formal network of partners, so to speak. This is a little outdated, as I'll mention later today, but we have added a couple additional partners on board this fiscal year. But this kind of shows some of the partners that we work with. 7 entrepreneur centers that really operate in their local markets. CoLab is one of those there in Chattanooga. And then we also have some statewide industry networks that operate in, you know, particular sectors such as life science and advanced energy that you see here. The ones we've added recently are in agriculture and automotive industries. And then we also work with Bunker Labs, which focuses on veteran entrepreneurs. And so it's really through this network that any entrepreneur or entrepreneurial researcher can leverage the resources that exist across the entire state. So For instance, let's say you're a researcher or an entrepreneur in Jackson, Tennessee. You, of course, want to get connected with the co, but there may be a mentor in Cookeville that has the expertise that you need, right? Or there could be an investor out of Chattanooga that is interested in the type of work that you're doing. It's through this network that any sort of individual company or entity can utilize and leverage the resources that exist across the entire state. So one of Launch Tennessee's sort of key roles is to provide that connective tissue. We also have some areas of focus that we think, you know, as a statewide organization, we're more uniquely positioned to take on, such as capital formation and market building and some of those things that work better statewide. So now that you know a little bit about us, SBIR is one of those things that falls particularly under my role, because I work a lot with researchers who are trying to get you know, their technology, their product commercialized into the marketplace. And SBIR and STTR, which is sort of under one umbrella, is one federal grant opportunity that is can be super valuable to some of these really early stage, kind of high risk technologies that still need some R&D before they're ready for the market. And that's really what the goal is a lot of these sort of high risk, early stage technologies are not necessarily attractive yet to, say, private capital. And this is a way that the government, by providing non-dilutive capital, can sort of invest, so to speak, in these early stage companies and move them closer to the point of commercialization. It's, you know, nothing's free, but it's about as close to free money as a small business, especially a tech business, can get. And so if there is more R&D that needs to be done, this can be a great avenue. I don't think I have a slide on this. I will say it is extremely competitive. And so it's good to know that going into this. Overall, across the agencies, of course, those differ, but overall the success rate is about a little less than 20%. And so it's good to know just going into it that it can be one of maybe several potential opportunities. We do have some resources here in Tennessee that can help maybe boost that success rate a little bit higher that I'll talk about. But it is helpful to know that it is a pretty competitive program at the national level. And like I mentioned, it really focused originally on sort of helping small businesses meet their R&D needs. More recently, the requirements around commercialization and really the commercialization plan and the potential for that product or technology in the marketplace has played more and more of a role in the evaluation process. And so it's not geared towards R&D for the sake of R&D, right? They're really, especially some of the agencies, but really all of them now, are looking more and more at, is there a product market fit? What customer discovery has been done to say, hey, people actually want to pay for this? So more than just being about the science, although that kind of technical side definitely needs to be there, and they have technical reviewers for that, they're also looking at what's the commercial potential of this product or technology more than ever. And it's for small businesses, which I mentioned, and this is important because it is the small business that is the applicant, even when they're partnering with a university or with researchers or with, you know, other research institutions. It's always the small business that's the applicant. And small business is, from the SBA's perspective, is a very broad definition, right? If you've got 500 or fewer employees, you're a small business. What we know is that most of the SBIR winners have 5 or fewer employees. Some of them have 1 employee. And so it's very early stage. So don't let that definition sort of skew your view of what this is. There are some bigger small businesses that that apply and win these, but it really is geared towards those very early stage sort of lean companies. And they are for profit. So this grant opportunity is only available, again, for for-profit companies, not research institutions, not nonprofits, anything like that. And all the work needs to be performed in the US. And so that's why a lot of times small businesses are looking to partner with a research institution that can help them with their research and development somewhat, you know, as long as it's in the US, that partnership is good to go. There are a couple phases of SBIR that if you look at solicitations and as you're sort of maybe considering this as an opportunity to be aware of, phase 1 is the first one typically, and that's really sort of just feasibility, proof of concept, work, usually 6 to 12 months and a smaller dollar amount. Whereas phase 2, which you typically are awarded after a phase 1, is more about your prototype development, field testing, sort of that next step towards commercialization. There are a couple of agencies that provide a fast track, which is where they basically award phase 1 and 2 at once. And those are even more competitive. And so you really want to have a compelling argument if you're going to go after one of those proposals. Typically, a company will go through sort of these different phases. And phase 3 is not actually an SBIR really award. What they mean is commercialization. And so you're getting money from another entity, whether that's venture capital or other sort of investment or sales, right? Imagine that, like getting revenue, that's also a form of money. And so really that's kind of the point, is for them to get to what they are calling phase 3, which is really just commercialization. And that's the role of this funding. Okay, so there's 2 types, as we sort of mentioned, and you may be familiar with these, SBIR and then STTR, which is Small Business Technology Transfer. Don't ask me why it's not SBTT, because I have no idea, just to make it a little more complicated. But SBIR is a much bigger part of the budget. Actually, there's a federal mandate or policy directive, excuse me, whatever, that says these 11 agencies have to set aside a certain amount of their budget for these purposes. And so the SBIR program is much larger, as you can see in terms of dollar amount, but they both are valuable, and there can be times where it makes sense to go for one or another. The STTR program, the main difference is that it requires a partnership with a nonprofit research institution like a university or a federal lab or something like that. While SBIR, you can partner with one of those institutions, it's not required, and it only can be up to a certain amount of the budget. Whereas the STTR, that's kind of the main point of it, is partnering with a research institution sort of in a joint venture to get that product to market. Although it's less, it looks like, well, it is less money available yearly, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's harder to get, because there are fewer applicants that qualify based on the requirements. And so if, there are definitely reasons why, and especially in this group that is university affiliated, there are more reasons why you might consider an SBIR, which we'll get into here. I'm trying to go to the next slide. Let's see, there we go. So like I mentioned, the work requirement for SBIR is that it's primarily done by the small business. Again, you can collaborate with a different partner or a research institution, but it's not required. Although what you'll see is that a lot of companies do seek out some kind of partnership, if only to round out their sort of expertise and capabilities that are represented on the team, right? So maybe they alone are not as compelling of a team to the reviewers, but if they're partnering with really smart, strong researchers that have experience in the field, that makes that application stronger for that company. And so that's why a lot of times companies will be seeking some kind of university partnership. Now, this is important. If you're applying for an SBIR, if you're a company that's applying for SBIR, the principal investigator has to be primarily employed with a small business, which is why a lot of times it's difficult for someone who's fully employed full-time at a university to go after an SBIR. Now, each agency is a little bit different about what they mean primarily employed, but typically speaking, what that means is that you can't work more than 19 hours anywhere else. So even if you say, hey, I'm working 90 hours a week and 50 of them are with the company, if you can't have 40 at a university. I mean, that's just sort of a silly example, but they do have very specific requirements for where your employment lies. Now, it doesn't have to be that way at the time of application. So you could apply and have your employment primarily elsewhere, but if you are to be awarded, you would need to make that change. And so if you are looking at these different you know, solicitations and you are the PI, it's just really important to see if that, you know, read the specific requirements and see if you meet that. If not, it may be a case where you are looking to partner with a company to help to be the PI or another individual that you can bring onto the team. You know, especially if you're not willing to, or it doesn't make sense to leave what you're doing full time. And like I mentioned, these are usually less than a year. It's typically somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 for the phase one, but the phase twos are, you know, can be upwards of $1 million. And so we're not talking about a small amount of cash, right? If you do win one or more of these, it can really make a lot of difference for the technology. But it's important to understand sort of who they're requiring the PI to be. STTR, like I mentioned, is a little bit different, where collaboration or a partnership is sort of the goal. And so at least 40% of the work or the budget of the work has to go to the small business, but the rest can be subcontracted to that nonprofit or research institution. Yes, at least 30%. Now, except for NSF, any of the other agencies that have this as an opportunity allow the PI, this is what's the key difference here, allow the PI to be primarily employed by the nonprofit or the research institution or the university. So this is a case where as a you know, UTC employee, you could serve potentially as the PI on an STTR application. You still need to be affiliated with the business because, again, the awards are awarded to the small business and not the research institution. But it does kind of loosen up that employment requirement a little bit. NSF, the National Science Foundation, is a little bit different in that it still does require primary employment by the small business. But the other four agencies that have STTR, which is Defense, Health, Energy, and NASA, they do allow the PI to be primarily employed elsewhere. And so a lot of times, this is an avenue that people are exploring if they are affiliated with the university, but wanting to own the project. And then this is just a summary. I know you'll get the slides, which is why I tried to be super thorough here. You can go ahead and look back at that. Again, sort of the main differences being that sort of that PI employment requirement, as well as the work requirement about how much of the budget can actually go to the university or the research institution. And you'll see that STTR is only offered by 5 of the 11 agencies that offer SBIR. So here's sort of a visual of that. The light blue have both, whereas the dark blue have only SBIR. So there aren't STTR opportunities at those agencies. Now, that's not to say that you should avoid those entirely, right? But that could be an opportunity where if you are looking to be, you know, employed elsewhere, but pursue an opportunity with one of those agencies, that partnering with someone else who can be the PI, or you know, a company whose research sort of interests align with yours might be a better avenue. Okay, and there's a lot of difference between the particular agencies, which we don't have time to get into here. I'm happy to talk about that, you know, offline, or if you have questions about that. And there are a lot of online resources to sort of help you sort through that. But it's helpful to know that if they're not all speaking one language, all these 11 agencies operate their SBIR programs independently. And so they call them all sorts of different things. As you can see here, the budget sizes are different, and therefore sometimes the award amounts are different. Some of them are grants and some of them are contracts, which may seem sort of like semantics, but it does matter in terms of kind of what the solicitations look like. For instance, grant agencies often have broader topics where there's a little more leeway in terms of what you can propose, and sometimes they even have just an open topic where you can sort of give your good ideas. Whereas contract agencies typically, and Department of Defense is a great example of this, have very specific problems that they're looking for solutions to. And so if it's a good fit, then that's great, but they're not really looking to fund whatever you think is interesting. They have these very specific sort of again, problems that they're trying to solve. And as a winner, you contract with them then to, you know, potentially provide that solution. All the review processes are different. They do have various levels of interest in the commercialization, although, like I said, the trend is moving more and more to that being an interest to all of them. But National Science Foundation in particular, that's a big importance to that agency. But yeah, this slide basically is here to say it can be very complicated. They're not all run the same way, and so it's helpful to sort of do your research. I don't have a slide on this here, but there are also different registration requirements for each. Some of them have like six, you know, grants.gov or SAM or DUNS or whatever that you have to register with, and some of those you may already have, but it's helpful to really take the time to figure out like what are those requirements for the particular agency that you might be considering applying to. And here's what I was talking about with the contracts. Like some, you know, you don't want to be trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, or whatever that saying is, right? Like, especially when it comes to the contract agencies like DARPA, which is a subset of DoD. They are looking to solve a problem, not for you to propose a solution to a problem that they haven't expressed. And so just kind of keep that in mind, especially if you are applying to one of those contract agencies. Here's just a brief overview of sort of which ones do grants, which do contracts. Some of them are a little funny because they act like one or another, like the Department of Health, where do I have that one here? Is mostly grants. They also do contracts, but they really still kind of act like grants. And so this is a helpful overview if you're just trying to see what kind of topics you can expect at each of those. And then here's just a little overview of sort of the budget breakdown. As you can see, DoD is huge, probably to no one's surprise. Health and Human Services also has a huge budget, basically because it's based on a percentage, right? So because we spend a lot on defense, 3.2% or whatever of that goes to SBIR is going to be a larger number than some of these other ones. Okay, we talked about this a little bit about who can be the PI, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time also on who should be the PI, because sometimes, you know, you may try to just put someone in there that meets the eligibility requirements, but you also want to make sure that they're able to do the job as well. And so one thing is that they are looking for a single individual. It doesn't mean that that person's doing all the work, right, or responsible for all the work, but they are looking for one person to sort of oversee the work, both well, at least scientifically and sort of on the technical side of things. They should have relevant experience, of course. PhD is not required. Plenty of SBIR applications go, or with awards go to folks that don't have a PhD. I actually even heard of a story of somebody in Montana who only had their high school diploma and got an SBIR because their technology was so interesting. But typically speaking, especially for some of the reviewers who are in that technical field, like pedigree does matter. And so it's helpful to have someone who has the relevant experience, technical experience in particular, to sort of be leading that aspect of the project. And again, I keep emphasizing this because it just is really important for all SBIR and even NSF or STTR. They can't be employed full-time anywhere else. And so it is important to just keep that in mind, that this really is geared towards the company, the small business being the one that's leading the project to get it to market. And then just a little bit about sort of what they're looking for in terms of the review process. I actually got the chance to serve on the review process for NSF this year, which was really cool. I was like, are you sure you want me to do this? But it's cool. They have both technical reviewers who have more of the expertise in that particular field, and then people like me who sort of are the commercial reviewers that look at, you know, what's the product, what's the demand for this in the market, stuff like that. So with that in mind, you do need to have great research or R&D idea, of course, and it does take a lot of commitment. We typically don't encourage anyone to start an application less than 60 days prior to the due date. It can be done, but oftentimes it's just a different beast, right? Many of you have probably written tons of grants and have a lot of experience with that, but this is different, especially because of the focus on commercialization. And so you want to leave yourself adequate time for that, and adequate time for all those registrations and stuff to go through, as those can take some time. And so typically we would suggest not starting at least 60 days prior to that deadline, and really committing to that. It takes a lot of sort of man hours to get it done. Does the timeline make sense for your R&D needs, right? So one, the solicitation has to be a good fit for what your research is, right? We're not trying to do that square peg round hole thing, but also, does the timeline make sense? The more you adjust to try to fit the solicitation, the chances of something going poorly increase. And so you just want to make sure that it's a good fit if you're going to spend all this time and effort working on it. Again, the team being credible. So it's not just about the PI, but also the team, which again is why so many small businesses or startups are really interested in partnering with researchers, is so to sort of build out or round out that expertise. And if the research interests align, it can really benefit both parties. And then again, this budgets and scope of work, does it make sense for what you need, or are you trying to just sort of make it work to get the money? That typically doesn't end up working. Okay, so I did want to spend a little bit of time also kind of going over some of the resources that Launch Tennessee has to support this kind of work. One is we do resource workshops around SBIR and STTR and sort of what's available in that regard. Longer than this, so this is sort of just a brief overview, but we have a 3-hour, get ready, 3-hour deep dive that really goes into a lot of the specifics of what to do and how to make your application most successful. And we partner with some commercialization consultants on that. And so if you are applying to SBIR, or you're partnering with a company who is, 3 hours is nothing in the scheme of things. If it's going to make your application that much better, I absolutely suggest doing one of those. And we post those on our website as they're scheduled. We also do some around special topics. So we had an AFWorks, which is the Air Force SBIR specific workshop earlier this month. Next week, we're actually having one around revisions and resubmissions. And so if you get an application back that wasn't funded, what do you do with that feedback, right? How can you adjust the reviewer's comments and maybe resubmit that to be a successful application? So we do some special topics as well. But if you're interested in any of those, again, they're on our website, or you can always reach out and I can share some information about that. We also provide microgrants to Tennessee-based companies that are applying to SBIR. So if a company is applying to phase 1, for instance, they can apply for up to $4,000 for grant writing support to engage a consultant in helping them prepare that application. And this has been super valuable for a lot of companies, in that, again, especially if it's your first time writing an SBIR or working on an SBIR, it's just different. And so it's helpful to have someone on board that, has written a bunch, has won a bunch, has served on review committees and such. And so we found that to be really valuable. Actually, our microgrant win rate right now is sitting a little over 50%. I think it's like 53% the last time I checked, which may not sound that great, but compared to less than 20% is stellar, right? And so we want to provide these opportunities so that our Tennessee companies really have the best chance at receiving these awards and bringing these dollars in. Also wanted to highlight our mentor network. So I mentioned life science and energy earlier. We partner with BioTen and then the Tennessee Advanced Energy Business Council, which both operate statewide. And now we have since added agriculture and automotive. We're partnering with TenSmart for the automotive network, and then KEC and Ag Launch, KEC being the Knoxville Entrepreneur Center, is partnering with Ag Launch, which is a far-reaching organization to do our agriculture mentor network. And these are really cool because it's a lot of companies that SBIR may or may not make sense for them at some point because of their sort of early stage R&D needs. But it's a program designed to support early stage Tennessee companies in these different industries that and help them get to a successful funding event, whether that's a grant, right? Winning a grant opportunity, investment, revenue, again, that's pretty awesome. So really just trying to get them to that point, and how they do that is by engaging a wide variety of mentors, domain experts, research experts, and panelists to really provide feedback and work with them throughout that process. I bring this up in detail sort of because I think it's also a really cool opportunity for folks like yourselves who have, this really extensive research background. If that does align with any of those 4 industries, or there may be some overlap among the 4 industries, it could be a great opportunity for you all to get involved and be able to give your feedback from the technical side. We do also have them, matched with folks who provide, sales and marketing, or, help with financial modeling and things like that. But it can also really be helpful for someone to review and sort of question, the technical aspect and really the product of the business as well. And so if you're interested in any of that, I can definitely talk more about it. Actually, I'll show you. We have, subject matter experts that can review the company presentations and sort of on an opt-in basis. So it's as much or as little as you'd like, but be able to provide feedback on content. And then the other cool thing about this is that it's a good way to discover opportunities for partnership, right? So you may get, an email saying, hey, this company is coming through, we need panelists. Maybe it's a good fit based on your, research interests. And then you can see their pitch and see if their interests align with yours. And if it does, there may be opportunity for partnership there. And so not only are you able to sort of provide feedback and ask great questions of the company who's still very early on, but it could also just give you sort of a first look or a sneak peek into what companies that in that industry are doing, and which ones you may want to follow up with in terms of either supporting in more of an advisory role, or just as a research partner for one of these applications. That can be, it can be as easy as that too. And then I did want to also highlight our impact fund for those. I know we have a couple companies on the line, but for those who are looking for capital outside of SBIR, we do actually have a fund within LAUNCHTN that matches private dollars. There are a couple different buckets of that. So we have smaller check sizes that are around $25,000 to $50,000 that sort of help take the place of that, traditional family and friends round. We have bigger checks that are, about $150,000 that can support usually a pre-seed or seed round. And then we have follow-on funding as well. And so it can be really great opportunity to either finish out a round if you are raising capital, or if you're still kind of early on in your raise. Getting the support from a statewide organization like this, if selected, can also be used as sort of like a carrot to talk to other investors who can help, sort of fill out that round. And so just wanted to make sure that you are aware of that as a resource. And again, we can provide links or whatever. I can put them into the chat, or you can always email me, but happy to talk to you a little bit more about if that's of interest to you. And then when you get the slides, I did want to include a couple links that you can look at for more information. A lot of these are around the timing of the solicitations, which, of course, because they all operate differently, are all different. But it helps to kind of give you a sense of sort of what's coming up. If you're looking at a particular agency, sort of when are those solicitations available, so you can sort of plan accordingly. And then on the SBIR.gov website, I just want to highlight they do publish, not all, but a lot of the awards and the specifics of the awards, like what the title and the abstract, and then also who the company is, and that can be super helpful too if you want to see, might be interested in National Institutes of Health, like let me see what they've funded in this area in the past couple years, and you can kind of use that as sort of an exploratory tool to see if you are a good fit. From my experience, the program managers of each of those agencies are also super willing to take calls and connect, and really, some of them are super upfront about if it's the kind of thing they'd fund or not, which is great. But it's just another resource in terms of seeing if it's worth you pursuing. It can help to look at sort of what have their funding priorities been over the last couple of years, and there's a super fairly easy for the government website to navigate. So I just want to make sure you had that information as well. So that's all for me. My email's here, and I'm happy to follow up with you individually if there are questions. If there are questions now, I'm happy to take them, or we can wait till the end. But hopefully, at least it gives you a little bit of an overview of what SBIR is, and also what support is available to you here in Tennessee.
Thank you, Allie. That was great. I did want to ask one question on behalf of a faculty member that couldn't join, just to clarify since we're on the topic. They asked if faculty could serve as a co-PI on an SBIR grant.
So typically they do look for one person to sort of be the PI. I've seen co-PIs, so that is definitely possible. But the lead really needs to be somebody who's primarily employed with the small business. That being said, a lot of the applications that I've seen go into pretty extensive detail about the other researchers or the other people involved in the project. So even if they're not even if they don't have the title of PI, there's an opportunity to sort of put your credentials and what scope of work you'll be working on, and it just is not the lead, if that makes sense. So the lead person does need to be
from the, yeah, so that doesn't mitigate the
yeah, there's still plenty of space to talk about. Here are the other researchers that we're working with. Here are the strengths that they bring, besides just the formal PI.
Okay. Does anyone else who's on want to ask a question now before we go into some of the UTC information guidelines?
I know some of the questions can be specific, so it's fine if you'd rather email me or connect later, but I am available. So. And
I'm going to share the slides I'll share, have all of our contact information, so you'll be able to reach out to Allie directly. But if anyone wants to ask anything specific to what she shared, you can either put it in the chat or unmute and ask, but definitely no pressure. All right, while you think about that, I am going to pull up the slides from Angie Johnson. Okay, Angie, do you want to go ahead and take it from here?
I will. I first want to say thank you to Jennifer for putting this together. We're really excited to have her on campus, to have this position at UTC, to help advocate for our faculty and staff. So thank you for that. I want to talk today about some of the services our office can offer to help you in support of your SBIR and STTR proposal, and then just some issues, areas that may need to be thought through a little more than if you were applying for a non-SBIR or non-STTR proposal. So we'll delve into a couple of topics that may need a little more scrutiny. Here's the mission of our office up there. We work alongside faculty and staff from the inception of an idea all the way to the closeout of an award. So not cradle to grave, but idea to award. And we have some structures in place to even help post-award with those types of things. Nothing is too small or too big for us. Just this week, I've looked at award agreements all the way from $2,000 to one that was closer to $2 million. So we give the same support and services for any proposal that comes across our office. I would like to preface this by saying the earlier you engage with our office, the more support we can provide for you. And as Allie mentioned, you don't want to be heading into 60 days and trying to get all these things together, because there's a lot that goes into these SBIRs and STTRs. So allow yourself adequate time, and along with our office, I think we could develop some really competitive proposals. So kind of honing in on specific services that our faculty and staff have available through our office, we can help you develop that competitive proposal. We do this by providing you with checklists, timelines, templates for both the proposal narrative and some of those supplementary documents. I'm thinking things along the line of your biosketch, a current and pending support, maybe a data management plan. We have a lot of resources and templates already set up and ready to go for those. And then we can even help you kind of structure the proposal. We'll review all your materials to ensure that you're complying with the agency requirements. Make sure you're crossing all those T's and dotting all those I's. We can give you feedback on the project design, administration, and general grantsmanship, and then we can help you develop a budget. And we find that that's an area where most faculty need a lot of help from our office, and we're poised and ready to do so. We have access to HR payroll figures and that sort of thing to get you going with your budget and know what you need to conduct the project. We also help coordinate submission and award services. So your proposal has to be submitted through our office. So we're there to push that final submission button. But before that, we can help complete some of those agency-specific forms and fill in all those DUNS numbers and EIN and those types of things that we know and you don't necessarily need to know. So we can go ahead and help with that. We help with the internal approval process, which is a requirement for any proposal submitted on behalf of UTC. It has to secure internal approvals, and we use a web-based system called Cayuse to do that. We can review, draft, negotiate, and obtain signatures for any research-related agreements. So a lot of times when you partner with a business or industry, they would like to see a non-disclosure agreement in place or something along those lines. So I would be the person to contact, and I can help you through that process, as well as any type of award agreement or sub-award that may come about from you getting funded. We work with accounting services. So once our office intakes the award, we process that and request an IRIS account for your award dollars to be set up with accounting services. We work very closely with them. As I mentioned earlier, we have some of those post-award supports, and this is an area where if you need budget revisions or a no-cost extension, if sometimes a report needs to go in with a programmatic report needs to go in with a financial report, we can coordinate that and make sure everything's getting in together and on time. So if we can go to the next slide, Jennifer. We can also talk about some services that our office can offer to your collaborator. And again, the earlier we can be involved in this, the more we can help. We've found through the years that sometimes these small businesses struggle with getting registered for grants.gov or Fastlane or whatever is the appropriate submission portal for the SBIR or STTR that you choose. So while we can't sign them up, we can't do the heavy lifting, we can offer them some tips and advice for how to do that. And probably the biggest tip is to start early. Don't wait until the last minute to do that stuff, because you'd hate to have a great proposal that you couldn't submit because you couldn't get registered appropriately in time. Again, we can review the guidelines. I know in the past couple of years, we worked really closely with a small business, and the owner of that business, he hadn't applied for a lot of grants. And so really sitting down with him and going through the guidelines and kind of drafting a template of what the funding agency expected. As Ali said, give them what they need, not what you want to do. So helping him develop a template for that proposal was really helpful. We can do a budget review of their portion of the budget as well to make sure it complies with the granting agency. And then there's just some issues that crop up because of the very nature of these. We've had in the past an SBIR or STTR where the industry partner needed a lab or desk space at UTC. And that's, as you know, not always easy to find. So it's something that we need to think about and work through on the front end if that's necessary. Things like the there's a new visitor policy that's in the works, and it'll go live in the coming month or two, I believe November. But if this person is going to be on campus and visiting your lab, we want to go ahead and have a plan up front and make sure that we can walk you through that, make sure you have a plan for how to deal with that, and that you're complying with UTC policy. So those are some ways that we can support the business partner. Now I want to hone in on a couple of topical areas that probably need a little additional scrutiny. Again, just the very nature of these types of grant proposals. And the first of that is conflict of interest. I've got a link to UTC's conflict of interest policy here. And what we're looking at is when partnering with this business or industry, it's really important to ensure that there are no actual conflicts, but also no perceived conflicts. So there might not be an actual conflict, but if it looks that way from the outside, we need to address that. And so how you do that is you must first complete an outside interest disclosure form. I know for faculty and staff it's required, so you may have done it in the past, but you may not have disclosed this particular relationship. So you may need to update that. There's also a little more scrutiny right now because the form itself is undergoing a change. It's a new form. So across the state, the ORSP offices within the UT system have been discussing kind of a more detailed review of that at the time of submission. So I just wanted to point this out to you, let you know that this could be a potential area that we need to work through. UTC does have a conflict of interest committee, so you would disclose it. The conflict of interest committee would review if there is an item that could be a potential conflict here, and then we could come up with a plan to work through that. Department of Health and Human Services is an SBIR, STTR agency. So if you apply to them, there is the PHS financial conflict of interest form that is required at the time of submission and has to be updated periodically. So I just wanted to mention that. The next area that I would like to talk about is intellectual property. So I guess the likelihood of some intellectual property coming about because of one of these, from one of these types of grants is a little greater because it's usually cutting edge. You know, you're working with a business partner, doing something hopefully really new and exciting. So I find that it's helpful to let PIs know UTC's kind of starting point, where we would start with negotiations. And I know for NSF, they require, not at the time of submission, but prior to the award being made, that you have some sort of intellectual property agreement in place. So those few months in between when you submit and when we would like to get an award, we really need to use that to get something in place. So what that would look like for us to start with is that first off, pre-existing IP. So any IP that we have before we come together, what's theirs is theirs, what's ours is ours. So there's no claim there. If in the execution of the grant work, there was something developed solely by one of the parties, then that party would get sole claim to that. But more likely the case is that we would develop something jointly. So how we like to navigate those waters is that it must be disclosed via the IDEA portal, which is, there's a link here. And then UTC assigns our rights to the UT Research Foundation, UTRF. And from there, they would grant the business partner an exclusive option to acquire a worldwide royalty-bearing license to use the intellectual property. And then if they exercise that option, then UTRF and the partnering business would negotiate in good faith to reach a commercialization agreement. So we like to have something that says, that follows these guidelines in place before the award is made. And I would be the one that could help you draft that for your award. So you would need to get in touch with me. This is kind of standard IP language that I pulled from our typical research agreement with the industry. So nothing new here, but it is, I think it's really helpful for you to know what to expect before we get into those negotiations. Maybe you could have some preliminary conversations with your business partner so that you don't get a proposal submitted, you know, really looking forward this big award and then we can't reach an agreement over the IP. That would be really unfortunate. Most often we find that this isn't the issue, that, you know, we're able to negotiate in good faith to get to an agreement, but it's helpful to know where we start from. And then that takes me through that. I would like to mention that our office is not on campus right now. We are working remotely, but everyone in our office is available by email, Zoom, phone call, whatever you need to do. So just reach out to me if you're interested in pursuing one of these, and I can get you linked up with the support that our office can provide.
Thank you, Angie. I had one follow-up question before we open it up for questions. With the idea disclosure, so let's say a professor in a company have the the right IP agreement in place. They win the award, and then obviously it depends on the length of the project. But can you talk about, like, obviously they don't need to go disclose before there's been, an invention or something that has been developed. Ideally, is this before maybe they apply for a phase 2, or is it before the project ends? What are the kind of general guidelines?
I would say really at the time of invention would be the best to protect yourself fully, to protect the university's rights. Yeah. I don't think I would wait for a phase 2 if it's something that came about in phase 1. Go ahead and disclose it, and then UTRF can come aboard quickly and help us determine the next steps from there.
And I would just say for those faculty that are on the conference here, it's really important that you do that, even if you don't think it's necessarily patentable, because as you can see on the slide, this idea of what's pre-existing IP, what's theirs is theirs, what's ours is ours, what's joint. If that hasn't been disclosed and you enter into maybe a phase 2 SBIR, or you apply, for another award with another business or another agency, that may be challenged as sort of protected under your, your position at UTC. Even if you were part of that grant, it's important that you go ahead and make that disclosure, and then, let the folks at UTRF and OSRP kind of decide what the next steps are.
That's a great point. And even though you may think maybe it's not patentable, it could be something that's licensable, or we could have copyright claims. So go ahead and disclose it. The form asks for, like, who all worked on it, who's the sponsor of the research, if it's external funds, that sort of thing. It's just kind of basic information about what's been invented, who's been involved, where the money's coming from, so that UTRF can get an idea of what they're working with.
Yeah, and we did a workshop in August near Chiam, who's the kind of the UTC contact from UTRF, walk through this. So if anyone's interested in getting that recording and those slides, and you were not able to join that workshop, just let me know and I can send you the link to those. We're also going to be putting these recordings on the ORSP site in the future. But for now, if you're interested in just sort of a quick tutorial of sort of the guidelines for invention disclosure in the process, I can help you with that. Great. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to be sharing these slides. You can see the contact information for our three contact people presenters here, but I'll be emailing out a PDF of Allie's slides condensed with these for your reference, as well as a link to the recording if you've got any colleagues or other folks that might be interested in reviewing it that weren't able to join us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and if anyone has any questions they want to put in the chat or ask, now's the time. You've got the Ask the Experts on the phone here. And if for those of you that are, Meredith Parody is on the phone too. She's the director over at ORSP.
Hi, Jennifer. This is Sue. I have a question for Ali and Angie. Yeah. I'm from chemical engineering at UTC, And I had a question it was a great talk. Thank you very much for sharing all the information on SBIR, STTR. And my question was, for a faculty member, can they become a co-PI on a SBIR grant, partnering with a small business? I know that we probably cannot become a PI on the SBIR grants, but can we join as a co-PI? And what would be the steps that we would have to take for that?
Allie, do you want to take that since you've touched on it already?
Sure. So, yeah, like I mentioned, the main PI is the PI. They really looked at like the main person as the PI. Is the one that needs to meet those requirements in terms of employment and all that. And so, so they could not serve as that. In terms of being on the research team, yes, absolutely. And that happens a lot of times where, and that's kind of where these partnerships form, is that they're, finding researchers whose interests align with what their company is trying to do and bringing those folks on the team. So that's possible. I don't know in terms if there's anything in particular that they would need to do on the university side. Maybe Angie could speak to that. But from the business side, and then from the federal government's point of view, that it's fine for them to be on the research team. It's just the main, really the principal investigator that oversees the project and is identified on like application. That's the person that needs to be primarily employed with the business.
I would only add to that, primarily we see applications going to the National Science Foundation, and they kind of have some different rules surrounding that, but that's where most of our grant proposals historically under these programs have gone to. Yeah.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? One thing I wanted to touch on that Allie covered is she talked about the mentor networks in the state of Tennessee, and we've talked about this a little bit as something that might be forthcoming, but Allie, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the businesses that you guys work with that are often asking for, potential academic talent. We know UTC has a lot of, human capital that could be leveraged, and how you see maybe some of the professors that are on the phone. I know maybe they're looking for validation from a commercial entity that what they're doing in the lab actually could come outside, or maybe you've got companies that are looking for someone that's an expert in a certain area.
Yeah, absolutely. So in particular around the mentor networks, which is a great sort of subset of the companies that we work with, because they are really focused on typically R&D and kind of high tech, high science, just innovation. Oftentimes they have some sort of preliminary, product or technology. Maybe they have a prototype, but sometimes they're even earlier than that. And so what they're needing to do is complete some additional, R&D or run trials to really sort of validate on the technical side what they're doing. And a lot of times they have technical background, which is how they sort of like came up with it in the first place, but need sort of to round out the expertise that they have. And so there could be a skill set that you have as a researcher that kind of complements what they're looking to do. Also, frankly, like access to facilities and labs is a big issue for a lot of small businesses, right? And so especially if they're a tech, a science or tech company that's like operating out of a founder's garage, like they don't have the ability, even if they have the background, to run a lot of those tests that they need to run. They don't have the equipment or proper, lab or facility space. And so that can be another reason that they're seeking partnership. And then that allows you to sort of work on a project again, if it aligns sort of with your interests and focus area, which makes it sort of sound like they're like using you for the equipment, which is not what I'm trying to suggest, but it's just a reality of the limitations sometimes that these very early startups have, and that can be another benefit of then working with the university. With the mentor networks in particular, there are, like I mentioned, ways that you can sort of opt in or opt out depending on if the company is interesting. But to use life science as an example, they send an email out to sort of their mentor network, which is all these industry experts, all these domain experts, and say, hey, we're doing a panel for this company. Here's their deck. If you're interested, here's where you can sign up. And then you can kind of review that and see, oh, this aligns with my interests, or I maybe want to get involved in something like this, or maybe this would be a good contact for me, because our research areas align or whatever. You could join and sit on that panel, and then, one, be able to give feedback or ask questions, especially about sort of the technical aspects of what they're presenting. But then also that opens a door if you do want to partner with them, or or advise them even in some way, depending on kind of what your area of expertise is. One other thing that I've seen a lot is companies that start with one sort of product or innovation, but what they're really trying to do is not build their whole business around that one product, but sort of have a suite of innovations in, surgical tools, or agricultural, like all these different agricultural innovations where the company is sort of over these. And so you may have a, and technology that you've developed, or some sort of improvement that you think might fit well in sort of the products that they're already building, and could be added to that sort of license, and then added to that sort of that suite of offerings that company has. So that would be another just thing to kind of keep an eye out for, would be, hey, maybe what I'm doing is not specific to this one product that they're like trying to get to market right now, but there could be opportunities in the future as they, either start to manufacture that, or it's commercialized in some other way, that maybe your, innovation would be sort of next in line, and something that they'd be interested for. And then they can partner with you in that regard in terms of helping like get it to the marketplace. So, so even if it's, that's a long answer to your question, but I share that because sometimes it may not be that they really need that for that specific product, or that, that specific technology that they're working on. But a lot of times it's not, a business is not about one product, right? And so if you're really wanting to sort of think about how yours may fit into what they offer in the future, starting those conversations and just sort of partnerships, or earlier on can be a really great way to get involved.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I'd say, for the folks on the phone, whether you're UTC or a company outside, reaching out to myself, or, even the folks at the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, if there's an opportunity, you're looking for a resource, we can certainly help connect you with the right people. I encourage everyone to go to the Launch Tennessee site and sign up, to get the email blast or a newsletter that comes out pretty regularly, because it lists not only the workshops that Allie talked about, but also what is going on in other parts of the state. And that's, that's another thing to consider. It doesn't have to just obviously be in our region, but there might be, she referred to entrepreneur service organization. So locally, the CoLab, the company lab, which is downtown in the Edney building, is the EO, or I'm not exactly sure what the acronym you guys use, but the entrepreneur support organization. But there's ones all across the state, as you saw by that map, and they focus on different things. So maybe there's a medical device company in Memphis that Launch Tennessee could help get you connected through, that may be part of the university there or may not. So that's my plug for, reaching out to myself, kind of getting yourself on some mailing list. Launch Tennessee is a good organization. And through those, she mentioned Bio Tennessee. I think it was Life Sciences Tennessee, now it's Bio. Just to be aware of what's going on outside the lab or the university environment. You never know what that might spark or what opportunity might come from that. Okay, well, just if anyone else has a last call for questions, either in the chat or unmute and ask. If no one has any specific questions they want to ask our presenters, I want to say thank you, Allie, for joining us. Really appreciate it. And Angie for going over those kind of requirements and reiterating what OSRP has to offer. I think it's always good to get a refresher, especially if you've been at an institution for a while. You might forget or not know what's available, or maybe you haven't used their services before. So I encourage you to reach out to them as well.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for organizing.
Thank you.
It. Yeah, it was great.
Thank you.
And for those of you that joined, I'll send out, once I get the Zoom recording, I'll send that out with the slides and so everyone can review it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank
Bye.
you.
Great
Bye.
to see everybody.
Thank you.